What's up, everybody? The 2025 NCAA tournament bracket has finally been revealed, and in today's video, we are going to be making our picks and predictions for March Madness this year. If you've been enjoying all of the March Madness content, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and let's jump into it. To start us off, we are going to be in the South region where we see the #1 overall seed Auburn Tigers taking on either Alabama State or St. Francis out of that 16 seed matchup. And I don't think it matters which team wins in the first four. I'm going to be picking Auburn to advance to the round of 32. Then we have Louisville or Creighton in their 8-9 matchup. This is actually the first game of the NCAA tournament there on Thursday morning, and this is going to be a close one. I really like what Pat Kelsey has done there at Louisville. Greg McDermott and the Creighton Blue Jays making it all the way to the Big East Finals where they lost to St. John's. I'm going to be picking Louisville in this one just for the fact that Creighton, really it is Ryan Kalkbrenner and Stephen Ashworth. And with Louisville, they got a lot of guys, Terrence Edwards, Chucky Hepburn, to name a few. And also I just think Pat Kelsey is going to get this team into the round of 32. So give me Louisville in this matchup. Then we get to Michigan versus UC San Diego. This Michigan team just coming off of winning the Big Ten Conference tournament and not even really getting much respect for that. Still there at a 5 seed, even though having a pretty solid resume. And then taking on a UC San Diego team that won the Big West and is one of the best mid-majors in America. They are currently 59th in offensive efficiency according to KenPom and 31st in defensive efficiency according to KenPom. This UC San Diego team likes to force turnovers, and they're going up against a Michigan team that can get to be turnover happy a little bit at times. The only thing that scares me about this matchup for UC San Diego is Michigan's size. Obviously, they start the 2 7-footers, but I'm just going to trust the Tritons in this one to get the upset and move on to the round of 32. So give me UC San Diego. Then we see Texas A&M at the 4 seed taking on Yale at the 13 seed. Yale, another team that I've been talking about in a lot of my predictions videos, liking them as an upset. And I think this game could actually go either way. Yale, a high-scoring offense there in the Ivy League, won that tournament. Going up against a Texas A&M team that struggled at times on offense. They did beat Auburn earlier this season, so that was a big win for them. But they can be very inconsistent on the offensive end, so I am pretty 50-50 on this matchup, but I am going to give it to Wade Taylor and the Aggies to advance to the round of 32. Then we see Ole Miss as our 6th seed taking on either San Diego State or UNC, who actually got into the tournament there at the 11 seed. I think in that first 4 matchup, UNC gets the win. RJ Davis is going to be big in that one. I think he's not going to let this team go down without a fight. And then going up against Ole Miss, I'm actually going to be picking UNC to be my team from the first 4 to advance past the first round. So give me the Tar Heels. Then Iowa State versus Lipscomb. Lipscomb, another team that I've mentioned being one of the sleeper teams in terms of Cinderellas. But Iowa State team, I think they have a lot of good pieces. One key piece of news that we just found out about the Cyclones that TJ Altenberger let us know was Keyshawn Gilbert, one of their star guards in that trio of guards for Iowa State, is not going to be playing. He's out indefinitely right now with an injury. So I think that could hurt their chances going far in the tournament. But in this first round matchup, I'm still going to be picking the Cyclones. Then we see Marquette taking on New Mexico. This is going to be a battle between these two teams. Marquette more defensive minded than you got New Mexico. That is just one of the premier offenses, specifically around Donovan Dent, their 20-point per game scorer there at the guard position. I do like Marquette a bit more in this one, specifically because Shaka Smart has this team playing pretty well recently. Cam Jones is coming on as of late. They did lose to St. John's in the Big East tournament, but I really liked what I saw from this Marquette team, so I'm going to be picking the Golden Eagles to advance. And then Michigan State versus Bryant. Bryant absolutely dominated their conference and could be a team that could be sneaky for some, but I think this is just not a good matchup for them against Michigan State, so I got Tom Izzo and the Spartans moving on. Then for our first round matchup in the round of 32, we see Auburn taking on Louisville, and this could be a game where we see our #1 seed go down, but I still am going to stick with Bruce Pearl and the Auburn Tigers. Janiah Broom's going to have a big game in this one. I'm expecting them to at least advance to the second weekend. Then UC San Diego taking on Texas A&M. I am actually going to be picking the upset of UC San Diego moving on into the Sweet 16. I love what this team has been doing this year. Honestly, has just been playing extremely well, winning the Big West. So beating UC Irvine in that championship game to make sure that they're in the field, but they've had such a good season. They might have been an at-large candidate as well. And also this Texas A&M's offense, just the inconsistency that we see there at times, I think they could struggle with that. Also, UC San Diego likes to force turnovers, and I think A&M might lean into that as well. So give me the Tritons to advance into the Sweet 16, where they'll be taking on Auburn. Then we have North Carolina taking on Iowa State. This is another matchup where I could see North Carolina winning, specifically because of this injury to Keyshawn Gilbert. I think that's going to be key. Also, Taman Lipsey, he's been a little banged up recently. I believe he's going to go, but it might hurt Iowa State. I'm still going to be picking the Cyclones to advance past North Carolina, but wouldn't be surprised if we saw North Carolina get in to our Sweet 16. Then we have Marquette taking on Michigan State. Shaka Smart going up against Tom Izzo, two great coaches, also two very defensive-minded teams. Michigan State 5th in defensive efficiency, according to KenPom, where you have Marquette that's more in the mid-20s there. So I really like what this Tom Izzo team has been doing so far this year. I'm going to be sticking with them. Jaden Akins has played a really key role for them, bringing that experience. They also have Jace Richardson, Cohen Carr, and a group. Also, this team is extremely deep, which I think is going to help them make a big run in March. So we're down to our Sweet 16, where we see Auburn versus UC San Diego and Iowa State versus Michigan State. In our first matchup, I think this is where the Cinderella of UC San Diego comes to an end. Give me the Auburn Tigers. This is a team that's led by experienced players in Janiah Broome and Chad Baker-Mazara. Then you also have Tahad Pettiford, one of the best freshmen in the country. Denver Jones is playing extremely well there at the guard spot, and they're deep as well. They got Chaney Johnson coming off the bench, not to mention Dylan Cardwell there in the starting lineup, along with a few other pieces. I really think Auburn is primed to make a run this season, so give me the Tigers to advance to the Elite Eight. And then Iowa State versus Michigan State. I do like the Cyclones, and if Keyshawn Gilbert were to be playing, I actually would be picking Iowa State in this matchup, but Tom Izzo and the Michigan State Spartans have been playing way too well. Obviously, they did lose in the semifinals of the Big Ten tournament, but I think that's just going to give them more rest and be ready to go in the NCAA tournament. So give me Michigan State to advance to the Elite Eight, where they'll be taking on Auburn. And out of the South region, I'm going to be picking the Michigan State Spartans to advance to the Final Four. Tom Izzo getting back. Something about Tom Izzo and the Spartans in March you got to trust. I think Auburn and Michigan State would be a very close game, and could see Auburn winning it, obviously, but I love what Tom Izzo has done with this Michigan State team, and I think Auburn losing 3 out of their last 4, that could be a trend that we see. Michigan State is a team that plays extremely good defense. They're going to be physical. I think that can hurt Auburn at times, so give me the Spartans to advance to the Final Four. Moving down to the West region is where we see our number 1 seed of the Florida Gators taking on the 16 seed of Norfolk State Spartans, and I've got to give it to the Florida Gators. Just won the SEC tournament, looking like one of the most dominant teams in college basketball right now. I don't think they have any issues in their first round matchup. Give me Florida advancing to the round of 32. Then we see Dan Hurley and the UConn Huskies taking on the 9-seeded Oklahoma Sooners. UConn looking for their three-peat in terms of national championships. Don't know if they're going to get it in this one, but I do have Dan Hurley and the Huskies advancing in this. I just like Liam McNeely and Alex Caravan and the crew that the UConn Huskies has compared to Oklahoma. Oklahoma has Jeremiah Fears, which is a really good freshman, going to be maybe a lottery pick in the upcoming NBA draft, but I don't think they have enough to stay with UConn in this one. So give me the Huskies advancing. Then we see Memphis at the 5 seed coming up against Colorado State, the 12 seed, the Mountain West champions. Nick Clifford is a name that you need to know, scoring 20 points per game in almost all of his recent games. Has been looking absolutely amazing. Colorado State, one of the hottest teams in the country as well. Obviously, as I mentioned, winning the Mountain West tournament, which is how they got their automatic bid into the NCAA tournament. Going up against a Memphis team that, honestly, they've been playing well also. They just won the American, but that conference does not have the competition that the Mountain West does. I really like Colorado State in this matchup, so I'm going to be picking the Rams to advance. Then we see Maryland going up against Grand Canyon out of the WAC. Grand Canyon winning the WAC over Utah Valley in a little bit of an upset to make it into the tournament. going up against this Maryland team, the Crab Five. They have one of the best starting lineups in all of college basketball, but the biggest issue with Maryland is that bench. I think in the first round game, they're not going to have too much issues, so give me Maryland to advance, but would look for them to maybe struggle a little bit later on because of that. Then we see Missouri as our 6th seed taking on the Drake Bulldogs there at the 11 seed. Drake, one of our teams that has already won 30 games this season and getting some respect from the committee, going all the way up to an 11 seed. They play at the slowest tempo out of anybody in the country, and going up against a Missouri team that likes to get up and down the court and score a lot of points. I think Drake is going to be able to slow the game down and make Missouri take their time. And I actually like Drake in this matchup to get the upset. So give me Drake moving on to the round of 32. Then we see Texas Tech taking on UNC Wilmington. Texas Tech led by JT Toppin, Big 12 Player of the Year. Grant McCasland has done a great job with the Red Raiders so far this year. I would expect for that to continue in the first round. Give me the Red Raiders. Then Kansas versus Arkansas, probably one of the best matchups that we'll see in all of the NCAA tournament in the first round. Kansas, coached by Bill Self, going up against John Calipari in his first year with the Arkansas Razorbacks. I think this matchup could go either way, but I'm going to lean a little bit towards Bill Self and the Kansas Jayhawks, hoping Hunter Dickinson, DeJuan Harris can get this team going and beat Arkansas. One key piece of news from the Arkansas team, they actually are going to have Boogie Fland back into the lineup, which for some people might not be a good thing. Looked like they were playing a little better when he was out, but he will be back. So that is a key piece of news to keep monitoring. If you think that's a big one, make sure to pick Arkansas. But for me personally, I still like Kansas in this matchup to advance. Then we see St. John's taking on Omaha. Omaha is such a great story, one of the best traditions of smashing the trash can after they win their games, but Rick Pitino has the St. John teams going, and I can't pick against them, so give me the Johnnies to advance in this one. Then Florida versus UConn, our first matchup in the round of 32. Honestly, this could be a matchup where we see the national champion from last year going up against the eventual national champion of this year. I'm that high on Florida, so I'm going to be picking the Gators to advance into the Sweet 16 and make it to the second weekend. Then we see Colorado State taking on Maryland. As I mentioned earlier, this Maryland team relies heavily on that starting five. Also, that front court of Derek Queen and Julian Reese, one of the best front courts in all of college basketball. Not sure that Neat Clifford and this Colorado State team is going to be able to keep up with Maryland. So I'm still going to be picking Maryland to move on, and they'll make it to the second weekend. Then Drake versus Texas Tech. Honestly, there are a lot of matchups in this second round that I would be picking Drake to advance to the Sweet 16, but Texas Tech is not one of them. Give me the Red Raiders. I think JT Toppin is going to be a problem for this Drake team. Also, just the way he's going to get after and rebound. Drake is a smaller and a little bit undersized team, so I think that could prove to be some issues for them. And so I got the Red Raiders advancing. Then Kansas versus St. John's. Bill Self versus Rick Pitino. I'm going to be trusting the Johnnies to advance again into the Sweet 16 where they'll be taking on Texas Tech. I think RJ Lewis and Kadari Richmond are going to be a problem for this Kansas team. Also, I really like what Zuby Ejiofor has been showing recently, especially in that Big East tournament. So give me the Johnnies. So we see in our Sweet 16, Florida, Maryland, Texas Tech, and St. John's. So the 1 through 4 seeds in this one. And in our first matchup, I'm still going to be picking the 1 seed, the Florida Gators. Walter Clayton has looked like maybe the best point guard in the nation recently. And honestly, this team as a whole, you got Elijah Martin, Will Richard, Alex Condon, and more. This team is so deep. If someone's having an off night, there's probably going to be 1 or 2 other people that are having on nights. And so I'm trusting Florida to advance into the Elite Eight, or they'll be taking on either Texas Tech or St. John's. And I think this matchup would be really close, one of the best matchups in the entire tournament, in my opinion. But I'm actually going to be picking Texas Tech and Grant McCasland to upset St. John's in the Sweet 16 and advance to the Elite Eight, where they'll be taking on Florida. And in this Elite Eight matchup there in the West region, I've got to give it to the Florida Gators. Dominated not only the SEC tournament, but also just has played extremely well the entire year. I was under the impression that even if they lost that SEC tournament, they were still going to be a 1 seed. They just have that much talent and have had that great of a season so far. I think it continues all the way into the Final Four this year. Moving over to the other side of the bracket, where we see the Duke Blue Devils as the number 1 overall seed, taking on either American or Mount St. Mary's there out of the 16th seed. And again, just like the other regions, I don't expect any of these 1 seeds to lose, so give me the Duke Blue Devils to advance. Then our first matchup between 8 and 9s in this region, Mississippi State taking on Baylor. I think this could be a really interesting matchup. You got the star sophomore from Mississippi State and Josh Hubbard going up against VJ Edgecombe, just such an athletic freshman there for the Baylor Bears. Baylor has been injury-riddled this entire season, but they have some key contributors, specifically Norchad Omier, Jeremy Roach, 2 guys that bring a lot of experience in the NCAA tournament to this Baylor Bears roster. I'm going to be picking Baylor in this one, but I think it could be a toss-up. Then you see Oregon versus Liberty. Liberty, a team that needs to be talked about, actually top 50 in defensive efficiency according to Kim Palm, so might be able to slow down this Oregon offense a little bit, but I think Oregon's just going to be a bit too much. Oregon's really solid on both sides of the ball, top 40 in both offense and defensive efficiency according to Kim Palm. I like Jackson Shellstad there for the Ducks in the backcourt, and then you also have Nate Biddle, who has been playing extremely well in the front court for Oregon, so give me the Ducks to advance in that one. Then Arizona versus Akron. Caleb Love going up against this Akron team that likes to get out and run, one of the faster tempo teams in all of college basketball, but I think Arizona's size and ability to score at times is going to hurt the Akron Zips. I don't really like this matchup for them, so I got the Wildcats advancing in that one. Then BYU versus VCU. BYU has been a pretty hot team until they ran into Houston in the Big 12 tournament. And then going up against the VCU, the A10 champions, a team that really likes to get up and defend. I think that could cause some problems for BYU in this matchup, but I am going to be sticking with the Cougars, specifically for Igor Dimon, their freshman point guard there in BYU. Kevin Young's done an amazing job with developing him. You also got Richie Saunders that has been scoring at a very high clip recently. I just don't know if VCU is going to be able to keep up with the points that BYU is going to put up. So give me the Cougars to advance here. And then Wisconsin versus Montana, another matchup where I don't really like it for the underseeded team being Montana. I think Wisconsin's just going to outscore the Montana Grizzlies easily. So give me Wisconsin and the Badgers to advance to the round of 32. Then St. Mary's versus Vanderbilt. St. Mary's winning the WCC regular season but losing in the title game against Gonzaga. This team has had an incredible year so far, going up against a Vanderbilt team that's coached by Mark Byington in his first year, formerly there at James Madison. I think this could be a really close game, but I think St. Mary's defense might be able to slow down the Vanderbilt Commodores a little bit, so I'm going to be giving St. Mary's the edge, and they'll be taking on either Alabama or Robert Morris, and I don't think we're going to have too many issues for Alabama in this one, so give me the Crimson Tide. But there is an injury to Grant Nelson that needs to be monitored. If he's not going to be 100% in this tournament, that could hurt their chances, but I still like Alabama to get out of the first round. Then in our first matchup of the round of 32, we see Duke taking on the Baylor Bears. Baylor's just a team that is really talented, but just hasn't been as good as everyone expected this year, taking on a Duke team that has been absolutely amazing, won the ACC tournament even without Cooper Flagg going down to injury. He's expected to play in their first round matchup. I definitely think he'll play in the second round matchup if he doesn't play in the first, so got to give it to the Blue Devils in this one. Then Oregon versus Arizona in our 4-5 matchup. This game really goes either way for me. I think I'm going to lean Arizona just because of the different pieces that they have. Yeah, they have Caleb Love, and you also have Jaden Bradley, and you have a lot of other key pieces on this team that I think is going to help this team advance. So KJ Lewis, Trey Townsend, the transfer from Oakland. I just like the pieces that Arizona has a little bit more than Oregon, but it could be a close one. So give me Arizona to advance to the Sweet 16. Then BYU versus Wisconsin. Wisconsin making it to the Big Ten championship game, but losing to Michigan in that one. Again, going up against a BYU team that has been extremely hot, but lost in the Big 12 semifinals. I'm actually going to be picking BYU to advance to the Sweet 16 in this one. Kevin Young's team is peaking at the right time. I'd look for that to continue. I also think this is a game where both teams are at least going to score 90. That's just how good both of these offenses are. So give me the Cougars to advance. Then St. Mary's versus Alabama. As I mentioned earlier, Grant Nelson dealing with a little bit of an injury right now. Could slow down the Crimson Tide, but not here. Give me Alabama to advance over St. Mary's. I think St. Mary's just doesn't have the depth to stay with Alabama in this one. Then we see in our first Sweet 16 matchup in the East region, Duke taking on Arizona. And I know it's pretty chalky, but I got to stick with the Duke Blue Devils. They have been playing insanely well and only lost one game in the ACC play, and that was against Clemson, which is another team that I'm really high on this year. I've got to stick with the Duke Blue Devils. They just have weapons at every single part of the floor. You got Con Knipple, Cooper Flagg, and Kamal Malawach, the 3-stud freshman. Also, Isaiah Evans, another one that should be mentioned. Sion James, Tyrese Proctor, Mason Gillis are all 3 key contributors for this team as well and bring you that experience from the NCAA tournament. This team is going to be riding a hot wave going into the NCAA tournament, and they're going to continue that all the way into the Elite 8. And then we have BYU versus Alabama as our next matchup in the Sweet 16. BYU, again, Igor Dimon, Richie Saunders, 2 key pieces for this team, but this Alabama team brings a lot of size. I'm going to predict that Grant Nelson is going to be playing, and he's going to be playing at full strength, but again, we'll have to wait and see. But as of right now, I'm predicting that he's going to be in. Then you also have Mark Sears, who started off a little rough, but has gotten a lot better as the season's gone on. They also brought in Cliff Omarui to give him a little bit more of a defensive identity for this Alabama team. Another thing about this Bama team is they are just deep at every position. Seems like they can go pretty deep into their bench, 8 or 9 strong there. So I'm going to be picking the Crimson Tide to advance into the Elite 8 against the Duke Blue Devils. And in this matchup, I think it's going to be a high-scoring affair. But the one thing that I trust a little more is Duke's defense. Duke is second in offensive efficiency according to KenPom, but they're 4th in defensive efficiency according to KenPom. I got to give it to the Duke Blue Devils. I don't know if Alabama's defense is going to be able to hold as good as Duke's will. So give me the Blue Devils advancing into the Final Four. And for our last region, we are out in the Midwest where we see Houston as the number 1 overall seed out of the Big 12, taking on SIU Edwardsville there as the 16 seed. And again, no issues. The Cougars are going to be advancing to the round of 32. Then we see Gonzaga taking on Georgia in our 8-9 matchup. Gonzaga being an 8 seed is absolutely brutal, both for the Zags and for Houston. I don't think Georgia is going to be able to get past the Zags. I trust the Gonzaga and their experience a little too much. So give me the Bulldogs to advance to a round of 32 matchup against the Cougars. Then we see Clemson taking on McNeese. This is a very tough draw for this McNeese team. One of the things that Will Wade and the McNeese Cowboys try and do is really get up and defend and force turnovers. And this Clemson team is one of the best in the nation at taking care of the ball, especially when you have a guard like Chase Hunter on your team, just someone that you're able to rely on and doesn't give up the ball that much. I really like Clemson in this matchup, and it's pretty unfortunate for the McNeese Cowboys as they've had an incredible season out of the Southland. Then we see Purdue taking on High Point, a Purdue team that has been struggling a lot recently. They didn't do well in the Big Ten tournament, and this team really struggles to defend within the paint. Without Zach Edey to hold it down there, they're one of the worst teams in the nation in terms of 2-point defense. And when you're looking at a High Point team out of the Big South, this team likes to get to the rim and score. They're one of the best teams in the nation when it comes to scoring from 2. So I think this could be a potential upset, and I'm actually going to picking High Point, coached by Alan Huss. They've had an incredible season, won the regular season out of the Big South last year, but got upset in their tournament, but went in and won the tournament this year and are dancing. So give me High Point to advance to the round of 32. Then we see Illinois there at the 6 seed taking on either Texas or Xavier out of the 11 seed. In that first 4 matchup between Texas and Xavier, I'm going to be picking Texas. They've proved that they can play with the best there in the SEC, and I wasn't sure if they were going to make it into the tournament, but they are a team that I do like to make a little bit of a run if they did. So give me Texas in that first 4 matchup over Xavier. And then we see Texas taking on Illinois, and this Illinois team shoots a lot of threes, but they do not make a lot. I think Texas, with Trey Johnson, one of the best scorers in the freshman class this year, can do a lot against this Illinois team. So I'm actually going to be picking Texas to win in the first 4 and then win in the first round to advance into the round of 32. Then we see Kentucky as our 3 seed in this region taking on Troy there at the 14 seed, and Kentucky suffering some injuries this year. Kerr Kriisa out for the year. Jackson Robinson, he's done as well. Lamont Butler struggling with a shoulder injury. Andrew Carr has sat out a little bit as well, but he's back. This Kentucky team, although they have struggled with those injuries, though, they're still going to be able to get past Troy. I just don't think this team has enough weapons to go up against them. So give me the Wildcats to advance there. Then we see UCLA going up against Utah State. 2 completely different styles of basketball in this one. Utah State loves to get out and run and score a lot of points. They're 17th in offensive efficiency, going up against a UCLA team that's coached by Mick Cronin, and we know these Mick Cronin teams love their defense. The one thing, though, is Utah State does not have that good of a defense at all, and UCLA's offense is just better than Utah State's defense. So I'm going to be picking the Bruins to advance in this one, but I do think it would be a close game in that first round matchup. Then Tennessee is our 2 seed, taking on Wofford there at the 15 seed. Tennessee making it all the way to the SEC Finals, but lost to Florida there. They showed some flashes of really good offense there for Tennessee, and they've actually moved up into the top 20 of offensive efficiency according to KenPom. They're able to keep generating that type of offense throughout this NCAA tournament. I think they could have a deep run, so I believe they're going to get past Wofford in the first round. Then in our first matchup in the round of 32, we have Houston as the 1 seed taking on Gonzaga there as the 8 seed, and this would be the best matchup in the round of 32, in my opinion. You got the Houston Cougars led by LJ Cryer, Milos Uzan, and Emmanuel Sharp there in the backcourt, along with Jawan Roberts, who has been hurt recently. We'll have to wait and see if he'll be playing in this matchup. Going up against a Gonzaga team that's got Ryan Nimhard, Nolan Hickman, Graham Ike there in the front court. Just a lot of really big names in this one. Houston's improved offense is why I'm leaning the Cougars. Gonzaga has a really good offense, but they can struggle on the defensive side of things at times, and we all know what we get with a Kelvin Sampson coach team there at Houston on the defensive end. So give me the Cougars to get past the Zags in a close one, but a very fun matchup to move into the Sweet 16. Then we see Clemson as our 5 seed going up against our upset pick from the first round and High Point there at the 13 seed. And I would love to pick High Point to advance, but this Clemson team has played great this year. They were tied for second in the regular season in the ACC with Louisville, and we're the only team in that conference to beat Duke. So when you have a team that can beat Duke, they can make some noise in the NCAA tournament. One thing to monitor with this Clemson team is the injury to Dylan Hunter, a key contributor for this team, but I don't think it's going to be a problem for them to get past High Point. Then we see Texas as our 11 seed, making it out of the first 4 into the round of 32, taking on Kentucky. This has been a matchup that we've seen in the SEC earlier, and we saw Texas get the better of Kentucky. And although I would like to see that continue, I'm going to be picking Mark Pope and the Kentucky Wildcats to advance to the Sweet 16. Even though they've been struggling with injuries this year, I still think Kentucky can make a run. They've been playing well as of late and really starting to figure out what this team's identity is without Jackson Robinson there in the lineup. So they're going to be leaning a lot on Kobe Brea, and they're going to be leaning a lot on Lamont Butler. Hopefully that shoulder holds up, but if it does, I like Kentucky into the Sweet 16. We see UCLA as the 7 seed taking on Tennessee as the 2 seed. I loved what I saw from Tennessee there in the SEC tournament. Played absolutely amazing. Chaz Lanier, if he's scoring at a high rate, this team can go far in this tournament. Also, we saw some flashes from Jordan Gainey. Zakai Siegler had a really big second half. So I'm going to be picking the Tennessee Volunteers to advance into the Sweet 16. In the Midwest region, we have Houston, Clemson, Kentucky, and Tennessee in the Sweet 16. And in our first matchup, I think this would be really close. I was going to go with Clemson, but I think that Dylan Hunter injury might actually be bigger than what a lot of people think. So I'm going to pick Houston to advance into the Elite 8 out of the Midwest region. They've just been dominant this entire year. Absolutely dominated the Big 12, only loss coming to Texas Tech. And so I like the Cougars to advance in this matchup. And then Kentucky versus Tennessee. I think this might be where the Kentucky run comes to an end. The injuries are just a little too much for them to overcome in the Sweet 16. And I'm going to be picking Tennessee to advance there against Houston and the Elite Eight. And in this matchup, these are going to be two of the best defensive teams in all of college basketball. I could see this game actually being really ugly, low scoring, but this Houston team can win those type of games. These are both two of the top 3 defenses, but Houston just has a little bit better of an offense than Tennessee. And so I'm going to be picking Houston to advance into the Final Four out of the Midwest region. So in the Final Four, we see Michigan State, Florida, Duke, and Houston, 3 number 1 seeds and a 2 seed. So it is pretty chalky, but I really believe this year the 1 and 2 seeds are just a lot better than most of the other teams in all of the bracket. So in the first game, Michigan State taking on Florida, I think this would be a really good game against 2 very talented teams. You have Michigan State really being underdogs in this one, and also this entire season. I feel like most of the time people have stressed that they're not able to shoot the 3, or they just don't have the weapons on offense like some of the other teams have, but they continue to win and win in convincing margins. Tom Izzo has done an amazing job with this group of guys this year, but they're going up against a Florida team that is one of the hottest teams in the entire country. Todd Golden and the Florida Gators might have one of the most talented teams in all of college basketball in this one. They're not only good on the offensive side, but they're also on the defensive side. They can outscore teams when they need to, and they can get down and defend when they need to as well. I think I'm going to be leaning Florida in this one to advance into my championship game, and they'll be taking on either Duke or Houston, 2 teams that won their conference tournaments. Duke there in the ACC, Houston in the Big 12. Both have had absolutely dominant seasons this year, and these 2 teams are a little bit different. Duke, led by star freshman Cooper Flagg, and then you got the Houston team that's led by LJ Cryer, who's been in college basketball for 4 to 5 years now. I think Houston brings a lot of experience where Duke might be lacking a little bit, but John Shire really made it a point in the offseason to go out and get some experience for this Duke team, to surround these really good freshmen with people that have been in this position. He brought in Sion James from Tulane, but he also brought in Mason Gillis, who was at Purdue last year, that made it all the way to the national championship game. I think Duke is going to be able to lean on some of these key pieces as well. Also, Tyrese Proctor, who's had a great junior year for the Blue Devils. I just really like this Duke team. They not only play good on the offensive end, they also play good on the defensive end. I feel like they just have a little too many weapons for Houston, so I'm going to be picking Duke to advance to the national championship. So in the championship game, we see the Florida Gators out of the SEC taking on the Duke Blue Devils out of the ACC, and this is what I want. I think this would be the best game in all of college basketball this year. 2 of the most talented teams, in my opinion. The front court matchups would be amazing, with Cooper Flagg going up against Alex Condon. The backcourt matchup would be amazing as well. Walter Clayton going up against Sion James. You got Elijah Martin going up against Con Knipple, and Will Richard going up against Tyrese Proctor. But the one thing that gets me on this one is Florida has been doing this in the SEC time and time again. They beat Auburn, they beat Alabama, they beat Tennessee. It feels like everyone that gets thrown their way, they're able to beat at some point. And in this one, I think they're going to beat Duke. Give me Florida to win the national championship in 2025. Let me know in the comments who you have in your Final Four, and who do you think will win March Madness this year. And make sure to join the Basketball Network's Bracket Challenge. You can find the link in the description of this video. Also, if you've been enjoying all of the content we've been putting out, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you in the next one.